effectively they call it the open lid feature. Essentially that keeps the stoker from overheating the smoker by blowing air on it, thinking that the temperature has dropped. It'll allow it to drop down. Once you close the lid, it'll monitor it, see the temperature come back up, and it has a better idea of what your temperature should be set at. So there we go, the thing's kicking back in. It knows that the lid was open and it's cooled down a bit. An inherent shortcoming of the Smokin Pro is that it's thin metal. It cools down fairly quickly when you open it up. Doesn't retain heat very well. Doesn't seal very well. As you can see, it's kind of leaching out from everywhere. And as a consequence, you have to power the thing back up and get the fan going. Alright, now it's time for business. So she's hovering around 223 or so. It's currently set to 225. Probably bump it up to 230. Just give it a little bit more heat in recovery. It's cold outside. Today, like I said, we're doing some baby backs. Baby backs on the left are just a beer brine. Throw some Stella beer, some salt, pepper, cayenne, celery seed. Let it sit in there. Obviously you want them covered, but are completely submerged. In this case, to save beer, being the Canadian that I am, we just go through and we rotate them every half hour or so and let them brine for a good 6 hours or so. If you can brine them overnight, even better. These ones look pretty decent. Like everybody recommends, peel the membrane off the back. They tend to be a little bit better, a little bit softer, as you can see. The ones on the right, probably a pretty heavy mix, more of brown sugar than anything, but a little bit of brown sugar, again, cayenne, salt, pepper. We tend to use kosher salt because it's not quite as salty tasting, but still has pretty good penetration into the meat. So let's get these guys on. So as you can see, we're bumped up now to 230. The unit's pulsing. It's basically trying to maintain that temperature. Get rid of some of that smoke. And let's get these guys on. Just a mild sizzling because we're only at 230. We're only smoking these things, we're not grilling them. We'll spin that guy around a little bit, the fat side towards the firebox. And get this guy on. We want to make sure that we don't get that temperature probe that's sitting down there in contact with the meat, because of course it's going to throw the temperature off. Get rid of that. Somebody's waiting for table scraps. Sorry buddy, it's going to be a little while. And that's it. Close her up. So as you can see, temperature, of course, has dropped down quite a bit because we've opened the lid. Even at hovering around freezing point right now, 26, 28, 30 degrees or so, this thing does a pretty good job of keeping up, and it'll come up fairly quick. There is still quite a bit of heat in those cast iron grills. Hopefully that helps a little bit, but we have no shortage of wood. If we have to add more fuel, we'll add more fuel. As you can see from the last time I opened the firebox, it burns down pretty quick. I mean, this is fairly well seasoned wood. It's somewhat dry because it's been brought in for a bit to melt off some of the snow from outside. So it does tend to go a little bit quicker. It is fairly dry outside right now, but we'll let these ones warm up. Give it a little bit for this thing to come up to speed, and we'll come back and check and make sure our temps are good. After that, we're gonna pull a Ronco, we set it, and we forget it. Right, so we've been cooking for about a good hour and 45 minutes or so. Not even quite halfway through our cook. See, it's smoking pretty good. Got a pretty solid temperature of 240 right now, which is where you want to be. Blower is on. See, we're burning down a little bit there, so take advantage of opening this up and throwing another log in there. Let's move one of these guys over. See, we got some pretty good heat on the bottom there. Glad I flipped over the charcoal grate because it allows a lot of that crap to float to the bottom and that's not kick it up. So that log right there will be plenty of heat for a little while. You can hear the fan cycling on and off, trying to get it up to 230, 240. Let's take a look inside. So there's our 4 pieces. Whenever we open this up, we take advantage of this time to spray some apple juice on it. Nothing special. A little bit of sugar helps it stick. Obviously the juice keeps it a little bit more moist. You can see them steaming, so that's a pretty good sign that they're definitely keeping temp. Close her back up, check on it in another hour. Alright, we're probably about 3.5 hours or so from the start of our cook, and as you can see the temperature's dropped down to about 209 degrees. Now, you're still belting out quite a bit of smoke actually. It's just picking up again. The reason why it's dropped so much is because I tried opening up the vents to see what would happen. Unfortunately, you probably can't see too well because it's getting a little bit dark out here. It is about 6 o'clock today, so it's getting dark. But I had the vents open, and the consequence is that I think a lot of the air blows out and not in towards the actual cooking chamber of the smoker. So I've closed the vents completely. I've thrown another log on. You can see the coals are burning down, and she's slowly starting to come up. Now I've got the unit in a plastic bag. It is water repellent or resistant, but it looks good, so I'm going to keep it covered up. We'll let this thing climb back up. We've already started to baste our ribs with some sauce. As you can see the apple juice in the background, just to keep things moist. I'm not going to open it up. I'm going to give this thing a sporting chance of catching up and see if we can bring her back up to about 225, 230. Alright, it's going in about 4 hours now. Temps down around 209. I know it's tough to see. I know you can see the temperature because it's bright red. Inside, I'm sure that's pretty tough to see. No foresight for some lights out here, but suffice it to say they're pretty well ready to go. Fire still going good. I had to toss them around, toss some smaller splits, more kindling size. I think the mistake here was that some of the chunks were a little bit too big for this smoke box, and consequently they were kind of smaller more than they were burning. But nevertheless, our ribs are looking pretty good. They're almost done. All the other sides are done. I'm going to close this up, get some good heat on the sauce, let it caramelize a little bit, and we should be good. Well, you can see we're no longer outside. Unfortunately, it got a little too dark last night to finish recording outside. So that brings us to this point. What's the verdict? How does this unit perform, and is it worth the money? Before I get to my overall thoughts on how it performed and whether it's worth the money, a couple takeaways. First and foremost, the one thing I learned after using this device, and I've got probably 6 or 7 cooks under it now, anything from back ribs to smoked almonds, small briskets, some other roasts, pretty varied selection of food, different temperatures, different cooking durations. I think a pretty fair assessment of what the device is capable of working with. The number one takeaway I can tell you is let the unit do what it's supposed to do. Don't try to outsmart it. Don't try to outthink it. Don't do what I did. I think the shortcomings, and I use that word loosely, of my experience with the unit was largely based on my own testing of the unit, playing around, seeing what I can get away with, as far as, throwing logs in, opening the dampers, opening the lid, things like that. Leave it alone. Let the unit do what it's supposed to do. The unit functioned flawlessly when I let it do the thinking. Follow the directions. They're worth reading. They're fairly well written. It is a remarkably simple device. It does what it's supposed to do, and it does it very, very well. But don't try to outthink it. The second takeaway is that the unit is really only as good as the device you plug it into. And by that I mean, if you give it a device, a smoker that is leaking a lot, or has otherwise holes, or isn't properly set up, you're gonna run into problems. And unfortunately, on my type of smoker, the grate level has a fairly big gap in it where the door closes, and consequently a lot of the heat blows off the top of the grill. The adjustment here would just be either sealing the door with a gasket, or perhaps repositioning the actual temperature sensor inside the pit sensor, so that's not affected as much by the wind blowing across the grate. The third takeaway is really to know your fuel source, know what you're burning, know how fast it burns, so you can expect the type of consumption you're going to go through. If you're not used to having a stoker in there, you're going to realize, like I did, that you're going to burn up a lot of wood if you're not paying attention to it. So if you keep the fire set, you keep your fuel supply, your logs, your lump, your charcoal briquettes, whatever you might use, stocked and in the stoker, in the firebox as it's needed, the less likely you are to run down and end up burning through a lot more, and the less likely you are to give the barbecue guru a tough time of keeping up with a fire that it can't keep up with, simply because you didn't add enough fuel. So you still have to understand how much wood you're going to use, or how much fuel source you're going to use, and plan accordingly. When I got around the curve of knowing how fast I'm going to burn through stuff, I filled up that firebox, and it worked remarkably well. I closed the lid, and it went and went and went for hours on end. It wasn't until I started playing with the damper and only putting a couple logs on there, or only a couple of briquettes, did I realize that it didn't keep up, and that's a fault of myself. So the verdict: I love this thing. I absolutely love it. I think it is God's gift to smoking and cooking outdoors. This thing works very, very well. Some points that you probably can't see simply by a video or by what's published online is that the units are built very, very well. They're not cheap. They may be cheap to some. Unfortunately, they're not cheap to everybody. But the units are very well engineered. Right from the fan, the unit itself, the temperature control unit itself, is very, very strong. Like I said, it's water resistant. The engineering and quality of finish and the cuts on the parts, particularly the actual fan or the blower that you're looking at right there, it's incredible. It's got a great finish. It leaves you with the impression that you're getting what you pay for, and that to me is worth more than anything. I never got a sense picking up these pieces that any of them were built cheaply, or that they'd fall apart, or that they wouldn't last in an environment like a several hundred degree pit. These things will absolutely take it, and that's what you're paying for. And with that, I'm quite impressed. Usability of the device, like I said, it's as simple as can be. Set your temperature, put your probes in the right spots, and this thing is good to go. It even remembers what your settings are if it loses power momentarily. So, I mean, you can't get a setup any easier, any goof-proof than this. In fact, I'm so happy I'm probably going to get another one of these for my other smoker, because they just work absolutely great. So, without boring you with any more details, take a look at these guys. I don't work for them. I have no vested interest in them. I'm just one satisfied customer, and you have my wholehearted recommendation on Barbecue Guru's DGQ DX. Hope you enjoyed my series of videos. I'm only a rookie at this. I'm just putting this out there because I know there's plenty of rookies out there like me. Hopefully you can find something interesting from it or take away from it. If you'd like, post some comments. If you've got questions, feel free to post questions, and I'll do my best to answer them.